Hi guys and welcome. So in this recording I'd like to talk about the natal chart of Tori Amos. So Tori Amos is an American singer-songwriter. She's very talented, interesting musician, and one of my favorites. And I want to go through some aspects and elements of her natal chart that I find interesting and that I can connect back with her character. I don't uh, pretend to know a huge amount about Tori personally in terms of her personal life or anything like that, but I'm very invested in her music, and I've watched interviews and things like that. So let's see what we have here. So one thing that I find very interesting and relevant is that she does have Scorpio Rising. So Scorpio is the ascendant is at 28 degrees of Scorpio. So she has Scorpio ascendant, Scorpio rising. And immediately that speaks of her sort of demeanor when it comes to, for example, her interviews, her public sort of presence, like this air that she has about her that's very intricate and mysterious and deep. So in interviews, she often talks very it's not always light-hearted stuff. She's not one of those sort of very light-hearted pop musicians or something like that who keep it a little bit more light and fluffy. With Tori, she can do that. She definitely has a sense of humor that comes across also in her music, but she tends to carry a sort of an air to her, in my opinion, that shows that she's like in touch with the underworld or like some other realms and like deeper, darker stuff. And so she often talks about in interviews about like sort of like the shadow world and spirits and things that we'd maybe associate with more sort of the dark, deep, scorpionic themes. So she's definitely in touch with some dynamic influence from other realms, or the other side of what we just see. So she's more in touch with like the deeper, darker stuff. So Scorpio rising immediately gives her that air, that she gives off the impression that she is somebody who is deep and just very immersed in like trying to understand the world in deeper ways and expressing herself in very deep, sharp, occasionally cutting ways. So this also comes across in her songs. So some of her songs are, just very charged, emotionally charged, and very sort of emotionally impactful and like big when it comes to emotions. Now, Sun and Venus are in a conjunction in Leo, near the end of Leo, in the ninth house. I find that quite interesting as well because, she is a Leo when it comes to her sun sign. So you can even see this in sort of like her fiery presence, and like she's a performer and she really gives it her all when she's performing live, especially. So it seems like she is somebody who is in touch with self-expression when it comes to being a live performer, and just putting her everything, putting her all into the live performances in a way that is a very Leo-like. And Sun and Venus in a conjunction, of course, can indicate an artistic talent or an interest in the arts, and also the fact that she does have Venus and Sun in the ninth house. Also, Uranus is in the ninth house as well. So the ninth house, planets in the ninth house can take on a tone that the person is in, where the person is interested in things outside of your own immediate environment. So can be somebody who's very curious about foreign lands and mythology, and like something that's like out of your everyday occurrence. So she talks often in her interviews and in her songs about how she is so like influenced by mythology. Like in her music, she's influenced by mythology and like other people's stories, and kind of being curious about the world at large. And I think this very much has to do with her sun, especially her sun and Venus in the ninth house. So the ninth house, Venus in the ninth house, for example, can be somebody who's very interested in like art and art museums and art galleries and just like learning about the world at large and mythology, and then bringing that into your work, bringing that into your like making being inspired by that and making that something beautiful, bringing it into your own work and your own art. So Venus is very artistic, and the ninth house is very like mythology and like philosophy and art from like other lands and other realms, and so it's very she seems to have a connection with mythology and art and things like that, and just very interested in digging to the depths because of her Scorpio rising, and then also expanding outward because of the ninth house influence. So expanding outward and learning more, and she seems quite, she tours, she's a musician, so she's like well traveled, she's well cultured, and just a very open-minded person. Moon and Mars are in Libra, sorry. So that is also speaks of her artistic nature and sort of how she tends to be quite interested in interpersonal harmony. So she has talked about how like bringing interpersonal harmony into situations is not difficult for her. So she's somebody who is interested in like, being harmonious with people. So very she has a side to her that's this very Libran, more pleasant, polite sort of side. So even though she has this deep Scorpio side with the ascendant there, and she has this wild performing nature with the Leo energy, she also has this Libran energy, which is more balanced and harmony and relationships and social mingling and things like that. She does also have a strong Virgo influence. So Uranus and Pluto are in a conjunction with the MC. So there's a Uranus-Pluto. She was born during the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and that conjunction is conjunct the MC. And then she also has Mercury in Virgo as well. So Uranus, Pluto, Mercury, and MC are all in Virgo. So that speaks of her maybe more detail-oriented side. So musicians need a lot of patience. They need a lot of like. She seems to be a craftsperson when it comes to her music. So she's interested in just like chronicling and she's can take a while to make an album, and in a very intricate way, if that makes sense. So she, when you watch her in her interviews, especially some of her later ones, you can kind of see that she does have this slight librarian quality to her, which I would associate with Virgo. So this kind of a person who is interested in chronicling and very like intellectual and intelligently chronicling things, and like trying to get the work done in a way that is like meticulous. And her Mercury in Virgo, I would say, speaks of her very detailed and slow speaking style. She's very she really makes sure to get the point across. She's very detailed. She pauses a lot between words, between sentences. You can tell that she's heady in that sense. Like she's trying to get the words across in a meticulous, detail-oriented way. And she does have a Moon, Mercury, and Pluto in the 10th house. And so, the 10th house is the house of career and social status, and can be to do with fame. So, it's not unusual for famous people to have an active 10th house. So you can tell that like she's invested in her career. She's invested in, the fact that she's known to so many people based on what she does in the outside world. So she's known for being a musician more than just, like quote unquote regular person or a mother or something like that. Like she's known for, for her music to the public at large. So there's that. And also I talked about how her Mercury in Virgo speaks of her sort of slow, meticulous, detail-oriented speaking style. And I would say her Saturn in the 3rd house also has to do with that. So Saturn in the third house can be somebody also who, takes their time to craft what they're going to say in their head. So Saturn is very slow. Saturn is very meticulous, and it's about building the blocks. It's not like Uranus, for example, that just has a flash of insight and just goes and does whatever it wants to do. Saturn is more about building the blocks and meticulously going towards your goals. So having that in the third house of communication and thinking would show that like she is very meticulous in her thinking and in her speech. So I think this is another aspect of her chart that kind of resonates with me when it comes to her speaking style. So the way she kind of talks slowly and very meticulously, and kind of you can tell that like there's a heaviness in her thinking. There's a heaviness to the speech sometimes, and so she's trying to get the words across in a way that is very meticulous, and she doesn't just kind of, she's not like speaking really fast or she's not kind of joking around a whole lot. Of course she does have a sense of humor, like I said, but there's a sense to her that she's thinking, and she's trying to get her thoughts across in a way that is more calm and slow and patient and things like that. And I find her Jupiter in Aries in the 5th house quite cool as well, because Jupiter in the 5th house can show that the person has an inclination for like being larger than life when it comes to fun and entertainment. And so she's a performer. She's a Leo, and she's a performer. She's somebody who inspires others through her creativity. And so I think her Jupiter in the 5th house is very indicative of that. Also, the fact that it's in Aries, I think Jupiter in Aries is somebody who often can have a path in life where they're kind of carving their own individual path in ways that is maybe unexpected for others, or she's kind of a trailblazer, or like she's more she was one of the first sort of, I would say, I mean it's debatable, but like she was kind of one of the first women in the early 90s to kind of break it out into the music world and become like really popular, especially because she was mostly known as like a girl with a piano. So she didn't, she does use guitars, but she wasn't like a girl with a guitar or something like that. So it was one of those things that like really kind of broke out into the mainstream. I mean, it was there even before, like with Kate Bush and Joni Mitchell and other people, but there was a lot of kind of a burst in the 90s, a burst of performers, and especially female performers, who are kind of coming out with pianos and speaking of very personal things in their songs. And so that became like it's one of the kind of main musical themes of the 90s, I would say, is this kind of female empowerment and female like women coming into the music world and speaking their truth, and often with a piano. So I think her Jupiter in Aries has a lot to do with how she, Aries is very independent, and so Jupiter in Aries, I think it has a lot to do with how she kind of made her own path, and very independent, and kind of a what's the word, like a trailblazer, or I'm thinking of another word that it's not coming to me, but she was kind of told, I think I heard this in an interview, that her first solo record, Little Earthquakes, that some guy told her that you should take out all the pianos and like replace them with guitars. And so she kind of stuck to her guns, and she stayed with the pianos. And like the album, it does have guitars as well, but it's her focus point was kind of like her piano, and that was like one of her main ways of expressing herself. And so she kind of stuck to that, and that kind of carved out her career path. So her first album, already she was having this kind of issue where the business guys, I guess, were trying to replace part of her sound that made her unique. with something else that would have made her maybe more like mainstream, or what they thought would be more mainstream, or what's more popular, like guitars, things like that. But she kind of stuck with it. She stuck with the piano, and she carved out a really long, successful, really sort of admirable career for herself. So she's still going strong, and she has so many albums now. And so I think Jupiter in Aries is very interesting, that she kind of has that independent mind and that independent streak that helps her go further. So she's growing through her independence. She's kind of not allowing to take on somebody else's, path. She's very much on her own path. Now, I also want to talk about, Sun and Uranus are in an out of sign conjunction. So Sun is at 28 degrees of Leo, and Uranus is at 5 degrees of Virgo. But I would consider that a conjunction. It's an out of sign conjunction. So Sun conjunct Uranus is indicative of, she is seen as like an eccentric woman, an eccentric person. I think that's just something that's so that I'm so used to seeing in the music industry, especially with women, that they're seen as eccentric, they're seen as weird, because they're speaking of things in the music world that maybe are not always spoken of, or they're kind of they're creative artists, and so that is often seen as weird, or seen as eccentric, or they're slightly unusual. And so Sun conjunct Uranus very much has to do with that. So also breakthroughs. So Uranus is very intuitive and can have a lot of breakthroughs and like wild ideas about how to do things. And so I think that just speaks of her tendencies that are seen as eccentric or weird, because she's having those breakthroughs and she's having those ideas of how to do things differently and how to do things in a new way. Venus is also conjunct Uranus, so that's another out of sign conjunction here. It's about 9 degrees apart, so it's not very strong, but Venus conjunct Uranus also like liberation through the arts, liberation through creativity, and more freedom loving, and loves freedom in the relationships, and loves freedom in art, and just very creative and open. So that's interesting. And Venus is trine Jupiter, I would say that as well. So that's another indicative of somebody who can be very talented in the arts. There's like an expression of an exaltation of artistic qualities, because Jupiter wants to kind of exalt and expand, and Venus is kind of like aesthetics and art, and can be very musical. And Venus in Leo is very like, it's a performer. It has a performer spirit, and so that is kind of expanded by the Jupiter trine, Venus trine Jupiter. Let's see what else I have that I want to talk about. Mars opposite Jupiter. So her Mars is in Libra, opposite Jupiter in Aries. So Mars in Libra is interesting in the way that Mars is the ruler of Aries, and in Libra it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable. So Mars in Libra can be a little bit more sort of passive aggressive, or there's a conflict between wanting to do things your own way but also wanting to get along with others. I think in her case, her Mars, especially her Mars in the 11th house, has a lot to do with how she is a spokesperson for like causes, and Mars in Libra is like Mars is like the fighter, but Libra is more peaceful, and so Mars in Libra can be like a peaceful fighter or peaceful protester, but somebody who still can make a change in the world. And so I think the fact that her Mars is in the 11th house shows that like she can make changes and influence like society. She can be somebody who creates change and stands up for causes, which she has done and she still does, So it's like she's standing up for causes in the collective, and in like creating change in the collective. So there's not that much else that I want to touch on. I suppose it's interesting that she doesn't have any squares with the personal, like among the personal planets. Well, the Sun is square the ascendant, Venus is square the ascendant, Mars is square north. No, yeah, she has like, yeah, but there's no squares between, for example, like one of the personal planets and one of the outer planets or anything like that. She does have a lot of conjunctions, oppositions. There's a few trines here, few minor aspects as well, like semi-squares and biquintiles, but I'm not going to go into those. So I hope that gives some kind of overview, at least, of Tori Amos's chart. There's so much more that I could touch on. I forgot to mention that she was born on the 22nd of August 1963 at 10 past 1 p.m. in Newton, North Carolina in the US, and so she's currently going through her Saturn return as well. It's in the third house, so maybe some changes happening with regard to her sort of her thinking and her intellectual functions. So maybe some writing is something that is being affected, or because actually this is interesting because her newest album was actually a result came about as a result of the pandemic, but also it was scrapped. So she had written other songs, and then she kind of scrapped them because they didn't seem to fit what was going on in the world and what was going on in her life. So she scrapped, I think, a whole bunch of songs, and she started again to write her new album. So there's a lot of songs that haven't really made it to the light of day because she scrapped the old songs and she started again. And so maybe that has something to do with her Saturn return, like third house is writing, and so maybe some kind of things weren't aligning with what was going on with her and with the world, so she kind of had to start again, and there's that. And I did want to mention as well quickly that Mercury in the 10th house, again, I said about being focused on her career path, can be indicative of somebody who, her active 10th house can be indicative of somebody who is famous, but also Mercury in Virgo in the 10th house. Again, it makes sense that she writes, lyrics, she writes music. So that makes sense. Mercury in Virgo is very meticulous, very crafty, and the 10th house is kind of like our calling and what we do in the world and our careers. So her career path and her fame has so much to do with how awesome of a writer she is. So she writes music, she writes lyrics. So there's that. I don't know if there's anything else really that I caught my eye that I would want to talk about. There are other aspects here, but I want to leave it at that. So I hope this was interesting, and I hope it shone some kind of light on Tori Amos's chart. Maybe you learned something about Tori Amos or her chart. And if you'd like a personal astrology reading or tarot reading, or maybe both, you can email me at mattothinks@gmail.com. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, and thank you.